Hey man, say man, what is my favorite dread to say back up in this thing. I took my dreads down, still got on the same shirt, got a new cup of water. And we is ready to bang it out. Now today, by the title, y'all already know what's going on. 10 WCW moments that were real. We just gonna jump straight into it because WCW is crazy, bro. I just said that in another video. Let's get it.
10 WCW moments that were real. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. Number 10, the loose cannon goes too far. The Area Clash of Champions 32 in 1996 was mostly known for a real-life interaction between Brian Pillman and Bobby Heenan. During Pillman's match with fellow legend Eddie Guerrero, Pillman would grab Heenan's neck. The idea was that this would be in line with Pillman's gimmick and persona of the respective time. But the issue with this moment was that Heenan had just had neck surgery, and nobody should have been touching Heenan, yet Pillman clearly didn't receive the memo. Heenan quite rightly verbally snapped at Pillman, as he was baffled as to why Pillman would put his hands on him in such a drastic manner. Heenan would apologize for his cursing, yet the fans were firmly on the side of Heenan, as he was justified in reacting in the manner he did. Heenan would claim that he initially thought it was a fan that was attacking him. However, ultimately the blame falls on WCW management for not making all talent aware that Heenan wasn't to be involved in any physicality. Number 9, the horse turns heel. The final years of WCW programming were filled with wild and unscripted moments, and in 2000 on Thunder, one of the most unintentionally humorous real-life incidents went down. Terry Funk would take on Chris Candido in a hardcore match, and the match eventually ended up in a horse stable. Upon entering the stable, the horse, who was in close proximity, wasn't happy that two wrestlers had just entered into his territory, so the horse proceeded to kick the legendary Funk right in the head. Hilariously, Funk decided to verbally go off on the horse. Despite WCW booking various nonsensical angles during this time, it was a huge surprise that Vince Russo didn't endeavor to book a program between Funk and the dastardly horse. Number 8, Scott Steiner calls out DDP. Scott Steiner had a reputation for being one of the most unpredictable wrestlers in WCW in the early 2000s. Steiner's promos were often confusing, as he was prone to going off on tangents, and he would randomly rant about topics that had nothing to do with his respective feud. In one promo on WCW television, Steiner would bury Kimberly and Diamond Dallas Page. Steiner's beef with the duo was down to Kimberly, who was DDP's wife, reporting Sonny to WCW management. The issue in question related to drugs in the locker room, yet the specific details seem to change based on who shares their account of the story. Most real-life moments in WCW lacked any consequences. However, this time DDP took action. When Steiner came back through the curtain following the shoot promo, DDP would confront Steiner, and a physical confrontation ensued. Number 7, Hulk Hogan's real frustration. And there's no denying that Hulk Hogan had a major influence on the success of WCW in the 90s. However, despite the success, Hogan's political plays and creative sabotage often came to the forefront and often overshadowed anything Hogan did in the ring. Back in 1995, Hogan was part of the World War III match at the inaugural World War III pay-per-view event. The match would be won by Randy Savage, and Savage would be crowned as the new WCW champion. This wasn't to be Hogan's night, yet the Hulkster just couldn't resist making the match about himself. In an unscripted moment, Hogan would begin to protest that he was unfairly eliminated, and the pay-per-view would literally go off the air with Hogan complaining about how the match went down. And then...
I don't even bet, bro.
There was no need for Hogan to act in such an unprofessional manner. It made him look extremely petty, and it was evidence that Savage was uncomfortable with Hogan's real-life temper tantrum. Number 6, Bobby Heenan has had it. Bobby the Brain Heenan was an outstanding pro wrestling manager, and a similar sentiment can be shared when it came to his performance as a color commentator. Heenan had the ability to get the heel wrestlers over without taking anything away from the babyfaces. Yet during the final few years of his run in WCW, it became apparent that Heenan, just like the fans, had simply had enough. Heenan was never one to hide his emotion, and at the 1999 uncensored pay-per-view, Heenan decided to literally turn his back to the camera. Tony Schiavone and Mike Tenay were discussing the live pay-per-view broadcast, and Heenan decided to turn his chair around and face the crowd. Schiavone would remind Heenan that he gets paid to call a show, and Heenan responded by saying, "I don't get paid to be talked to like this, and I can sit whichever way I want." Heenan would go on to call his WCW run the worst 6 years of his life. He's always had extremely negative thoughts on Schiavone as a human being. Number 5, Kevin Nash doesn't care. When Scott Hall was let go from WCW in 2000, it became a WCW mandate that Hall wasn't to be referenced directly or indirectly on WCW television. However, when it came to Kevin Nash, who was Hall's best friend, he decided to outright ignore this directive. Nash just couldn't resist going off script, and mentioning Hall in his promos became common practice for the former world champion. In one sit-down interview on WCW Thunder in late 2000, Nash spent the majority of the interview name-dropping Hall and referencing him. In a bizarre move which highlights the lack of focus of WCW management at the time, they decided to air the pre-recorded interview, albeit with several instances of muting the audio when Hall was mentioned. It would have made more sense to just not air the segment entirely, as it led to more questions and answers.
Just made them redo it because
that WCW were running an angle, but that simply wasn't the case. Number 4, Scott Steiner shoots on Ric Flair. The issues between Scott Steiner and Ric Flair were well documented, and in 2000 on WCW TV, Steiner decided it was time he aired the dirty laundry between the two wrestlers. In an now infamous promo, Steiner completely buried Flair with lines such as, "Now last week I was watching TV and I watched a 53-year-old man come out here who has more loose skin than a Shar-Pei puppy come out here and say he's still the man. I see Ric Flair, number 2, the Nature Boy, come out here who's been the butt end of all the jokes because he's supposed to be the limousine-riding, jet-flying son of a gun, but I'm saying one time that you should take a cab and use that money to fix your crooked yellow teeth." In a rare move, WCW would punish Steiner for going off script, and according to JJ Dillon during an appearance on The List and Your Boy, Steiner wasn't exactly thrilled with his suspension. It was embarrassing for Rick. It was embarrassing for me because Scott went out there with no prior warning and just made what he said very, very personal. I called Scott on it, and he's very high-strung, and of course, he took exception, and he continued to prolong Flair backstage with me, and I said, "Your personal views with Rick are personal with you and him, and live television when we have a storyline, that is not a place to carry on and air your personal opinions." Bill Bush was in charge of the company at the time, Eric Bischoff was on hiatus, so Bill's first impulse was to fire Scott, and then he had to deal with Brad Siegel, and the decision was to suspend Scott, I want to say 2 weeks without pay. Number 3, a close shave. WCW saw dollar signs when it came to Tank Abbott. However, Abbott is mostly known for the time he pulled out a real knife on pay-per-view. Abbott would take on Big Al at the 2000 Super Bowl event, and Abbott would win the leather jacket on a pole match, and then he'd proceed to pull a knife and place it at Big Al's throat. Abbott would declare that he could kill him before WCW cut away. The commentary team had a difficult task in trying to logically explain what had just happened, and it became apparent that it was an unscripted moment when the commentary team tried to state that Abbott was trying to cut Big Al's beard. Number 2, Randy Savage slaps Torrie Wilson. In 1999, one of the most uncomfortable WCW segments of all time took place. In a backstage segment between Macho Man Randy Savage, Gorgeous George, and Torrie Wilson, Savage went off script and legitimately slapped Wilson across the face. Why on earth Savage did this is anyone's guess, and some fans have theorized that it looked like Wilson broke character. This evidently angered Savage so much that he slapped her across the face. Even if this was the case, nothing justifies this act from Savage, and it was without question a step too far. And number 1, Goldberg knows best. It was often joked that the inmates were running the asylum in WCW, and a great example of this occurred in late 1999 on WCW Thunder. Goldberg was involved in a backstage segment where he would attack a limo with a metal pipe. The pipe was used to keep Goldberg safe, but for whatever reason, he decided to go off script and smash one of the windows with his arm. A piece of broken glass cut an artery in his arm, causing him to bleed. This was one of the most gruesome injuries to ever occur on WCW TV. Appearing on Broken Skull Sessions, this is what the Hall of Fame had to say regarding the incident. You know, I mean, some things I may have taken personally. I made poor judgment because I was mad and I was opposed to grabbing a sledgehammer. I figured I'd use my own sledgehammer and just show how violently I could hit. Well, I was smart. Then I'm like, okay, this is live TV and I'm gonna hit it again. And I hit it and I go through it like a cheese grater. And I look down and I'm like, oh, this is nice. Live TV, grab my hand, white limousine, go to the front. Great video. Great shock. Boom. Blood everywhere. I went nuts. So there you have it, folks. 10 WCW moments that were actually real.
I mean, shoot, Bill Goldberg is a huge